their games right now, because their formula generally hasn't changed in the last 20 or so years. Um, and one example that wasn't part of the Mario franchise and wasn't in the 80s was Star Fox Adventure, which was originally called was it Dinosaur Hunter or
So, yeah, like Dinosaur Island or some shit like that.
Dinosaur? Yeah, and the original protagonist was the female fox, which is still in the game, named Crystal. She gets relegated to the damsel in distress instead of being a the protagonist, and most people would look at that situation and say, "Well, that's just for brand recognition or character recognition. It just wouldn't sell as much." And
Right.
there's evidence for that, and a lot of that stems from, especially these early games in the '80s, that the market just wasn't expanded past male gamers all that much. I mean, you had some examples of broad appeal games like Pac-Man and Centipede, but generally speaking, it was pretty much a male-dominated market.
Right.
So these are just kind of these classic tropes that she was describing, and it was pretty light on the analysis, except to say that this is a trend in gaming, which I don't think is the case anymore. But certainly, she had plenty of legacy retro examples.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I mean, this is only the first part of 5 parts, and she is laying the foreground for the history of video games. So before we can make that assertion, I think we have to watch the other 4 parts to say that this analysis isn't to have the body of work that's required to have like a valid analysis. I do think that the stuff she did lay down, she showed the history of how video games came into it and how those tropes have been followed by the most popular, like recognizable video game characters over the years, and she gave examples how some of the female characters haven't like broke out too much from that. And I think, judging by the other stuff she's done before with her girls on refrigerator kind of stuff, she has pretty spot on analysis. With the other 4 parts, I think she's going to come through and actually maybe convey the idea in a little bit more modern terms for people, hopefully.
She might, she might not. I think she has her fair share of criticisms who might disagree with that.
Oh yeah,
From what
like I
I
said,
can
this
tell.
isn't a popular what from what we've noticed on the internet in the last like year. This isn't a popular thing, so yeah, there is a fair share of criticism.
But I guess are we trying to link this with the Adam Sessler issue, or is this like a separate thing?
No,
Because
this is a separate thing. I think it's important to have intelligent people that criticize and still appreciate games, but are willing to critique them objectively without saying like, no, this is too taboo to touch.
I mean, certainly that's I'm game for anything like that. But yeah, I'm gonna need to see more evidence before I am convinced that damsels in distress is still a commonly used trope. I won't make any negative criticisms about her analysis until she comes out with more parts, just to be fair. But I'm unconvinced as of yet.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I'm sure she'll be releasing. This was a Kickstarter campaign that she had going, and she raised quite a bit of money. So hopefully, we'll see some more episodes of this relatively soon. I think that's it for news that we're not gonna expand into the big picture. Let's get going with our topic of the week, guys. We have pretty big news as far as EA announcing a while back, I think in about December, that they were gonna have an always on connection for SimCity, meaning that even though a good portion of SimCity is the single player game, that regardless it is going to need to be on the internet consistently to dynamically generate all the events that happen surrounding your one city or region, however they do it. We're yet to have played it. But this week, there's been so much going on about how the server stability, the day of, and even up to right now, still hasn't totally been fixed. The game isn't running, and people weren't able to log in. They had to get rid of features. People wanted refunds. It was a fucking shitstorm, to be honest.
It's a disaster.
It was a fucking disaster. They had to take the game off of Amazon on the 7th. The game released on the 5th. EA said that they weren't going to do any refunds. They didn't consider this a considerable enough issue to give refunds. Eventually, just the last couple of days ago, they said they were going to give out a free game. No one knows what that game is yet, but I think on the 13th they're actually going to announce that. A lot of users ended up bombing Metacritic with scores, bringing it down well below like 1.5, 1.8, somewhere around there. They had to pull the marketing from TV. So, I mean, needless to say, this is like a pretty big deal. Like, this isn't a small game. People who don't even play games know what SimCity is. I remember it from like playing it in fucking school.
Yeah,
so for this game to fuck up, jeez.
This was supposed to be a big deal release. I mean, they're in full blown damage control right now. And one of the things that's so messed up about this situation is that you actually go and look at some of the claims that they're making. The source of this issue is that you're playing this single player game that has to be connected online at all times, which automatically is usually a pretty bad mojo as far as like the general public opinion on the situation. But they argue, the developers or the publisher, EA, is saying that in order to make the single player offline, it would require a significant engineering effort. And then yet Rock Paper Shotgun just releases articles saying, well, no, we've got an insider that actually worked on the game is saying that's not really true. The servers don't actually handle any of the computation of the single player game. It's all about checking for hacking or cheating and the social aspects, the shared map, and that sort of thing.
Right.
It's nothing. People have disconnected their cables while the game is running and been playing for 20 minutes with no connection. So.
Well, we even have like an example in the chat room. Someone's saying here that they have it to where the server in private mode only checks the server every 5 minutes. So the game's running without even needing to like do like a hop over to the server and check what's going on.
No, it
can be done. It's a periodic thing. I think what they were stating was like every 3 minutes to generate all the dynamic content. But it just comes down to the point that, like a lot of this stuff doesn't really need to be always on. And I think that's what our topic of the week here is. We're going to be talking about always-on connection and how it's going to be in the future, because it seems like a lot of things are going to be adopting always-on connectivity. I mean, we already had Diablo 3, and if you played Diablo 3 on launch day, you'd know exactly how that went. Getting onto the server the night of was near impossible. We have SimCity now. FIFA 14 has already announced they're going to be doing an always-on connection, and Assassin's Creed has said, they haven't said whether it's a mandatory, but on PS4, always-on functionality is going to be part of the game. So that could possibly lead us to say that Sony's next console is going to have always-on connectivity. We've heard rumors that Microsoft's is going to. So we're just going to get this started. Let's talk about, I think the disadvantages far outweigh the advantages. So let's just talk about some of the advantages of having always-on integration. And what I'm going to go back to is a game that I'm fond of that had not necessarily always-on functionality, but had optional, discrete online functions, and that's Dark Souls. Dark Souls lets you have kind of what Journey does. What Journey did before Journey did Journey is there was this kind of ambiguous multiplayer that happened, and you could team up with people, and that happened all throughout the game. You could choose to pick these people in your group and have them aid you in like stuff that was pretty hard to do, and it had that kind of going. I mean, those are one of the possibilities of having always-on connectivity, allowing people to come in and help you with kind of like stuff like that, kind of like what Journey did. Like the dynamic info that happens in SimCity is also an advantage. Can you think of anything else, Nathan, that would be a beneficial thing of having your unit always plugged into the internet and always being checked?
Always plugged in without being able to choose that. That's a difficult pill to swallow, I think. I think fundamentally the issue with having an always connected game is consumer mistrust. What you're dealing with is this assumption that at any point anyone could be hacking the game, or playing an illegitimate version or something like that. And the problem is, while this shouldn't be an issue, I mean, it honestly shouldn't. This is the equivalent of MMOs here. We've played plenty of World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2, where
but I mean, where the backbone of the game is designed around multiplayer.
Well, right, but what I'm saying is like the game a lot of people do play those MMOs solely, or as
Yes.
solely as they can. And it's actually possible to have an MMO launch, have the player be able to connect, be able to play it without sitting there waiting the entire day or worse in some cases, in order to actually get in and enjoy what they paid for. What we're talking about here is if we're going to have to consider games as a service now rather than actually a product, then this is really poor customer service. This is if this is a service, then they actually need to bring it up to proper standards of being an actual product that services its customers and gives them what they pay for. This so many issues have to be ironed out.
Right. Well, and that brings us to the disadvantages of always on. Obviously, the first and the foremost, the most obvious is server instability. What we've seen from the two mass appeal games that have come out is there's been issues with server stability, even though that these games are fundamentally single player games. The idea that a single player game cannot be played for either a couple hours during an update or on the day you buy it, I think most people agree that that's bullshit. And it's fucked up to your consumers to say like, hey, you know what, you're part of this agreement. You don't own this game. You have a right to play it. So when shit happens, deal with it. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, think about it. If the game doesn't work at launch when it's new, then what's the expectation for the game working 5 years from now?
Exactly, and that's a big thing, especially with EA, because EA is well known for dropping their servers on many games. So what happens to a game like SimCity when it becomes like a niche game in like say 12 years and no one's playing it? They drop the servers, and that $60 game that you bought, it vanishes. You can't play it anymore. Is that
Or
really something
$70.
you? Or yeah, or $70. What happens? Yeah, I mean, in some cases, even like fucking $90 for that game. So what happens? Is that how you treat your consumers? Just because there's not enough of you interested in this that you're no longer able to play the game? Do they patch the game and make it an offline thing? What happens in those kind of situations?
They have to actually, well, first of all, I haven't really seen any examples of an always connected game giving customers more advantages than one that is not, because we've seen optional connected single player games like the examples you gave that actually give us as much or more benefit than these games that make it mandatory.
Right.
And if this is the standard that we have to look forward to for gaming, then the predicted collapse of the video game market, the second crash, as it's been called, might be imminent. To be honest,
I mean, you honestly think it's like that, like doom and gloom? Do you think it would be something? I mean, not that I necessarily disagree with you, because there's an issue of like infrastructure. The fact of the matter is there's not enough broadband infrastructure that's suitable for an always-on connection, especially in America. So do you think that's even something that major console manufacturers would considering that? And if so, do you think that would honestly like bring down the console market?
I mean, let's just say that the evidence needs to be forthcoming sooner rather than later. I have no doubt that it is possible to do what they're promising with this. I mean, this is single player that has constantly evolving content. If you think of maybe a single player RPG like something from Bethesda, where the world is constantly changing and evolving, and rather than the same people being in the same places every time you visit a village, rather it's being passively updated in the background constantly by patches and new content that's being pushed to the player, and the game can be ever evolving as a result of that, and there is kind of an appeal to that. But this shoddy excuse for customer service has to stop. I mean, if people are going to stand for this, or people are going to tolerate, they're actually going to buy these games that have shown absolutely abhorrent quality control and things like that, then it's just going to get more